All right, the guy from Hoboken had a question. What's a squat? Can anybody answer that?
Yeah.
Yeah, you want to answer this question? What's a squat?
Basically, I mean, squatting has a long history, right? And it's illegal occupation of space, right? And at least I don't know much about United States, but in Europe it has like serious political underpinnings. You know, like struggling against gentrification, against like greedy landlords.
So it's in political protest?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so I knew it was like illegal occupation, but I didn't know if it represented anything more than that.
So you can say like Paris Commune was the first squat because it was occupation, right? So I think the word occupation, right? It's
Hello.
Yeah.
Like
It's
long
not,
history.
It's not like a crack house, you know, where like people are just squatting.
It can be something to everybody, right?
Yeah.
So I'm an activist. So for me, it's an activist center. Bullet Space is a famous squat in New York City. That's an art squat. C squat, one of the most famous squats. It's a musical squat.
What does the C mean?
The C because it's on Avenue C.
Oh, okay.
So this Alphabet City, I guess there's a lot of stuff going on with ABCs, you know, but Alphabet City is like, everybody know what it is? East Village, Alphabet City, what else? Lower East Side has millions of names. Lower East Side?
Lower Seda. Which is surrounded by public housing and a little bit of Latino area.
So it's got a lot of different names, but that was the climate, probably like 20 years ago, where it was very conducive for squats, and community gardens has the highest concentration of community gardens anywhere in the United States, 38 or 39 right now in the Lower East Side. So it's a very good climate where people took over public space that was the city space, but the city had a lot of space back then, 35 years ago, because it was broke. It was much like Detroit right now. So the city cut back on social services, the police, the schools, the garbage pickup. They cut back very heavily in the Lower East Side or Lower East Side, Alphabet City, and they cut back in the South Bronx. The people on the Lower East Side took back the neighborhood themselves. They didn't want to wait for the city. They took back the spaces, the buildings, the gardens, and in that process, you had a real different way of thinking of Skillshare, where people taught each other stuff. They had to fix up buildings. I was a plumber, so I had to help fix up. There was people who were electricians, and it was a way of taking back the neighborhood, but then also using different skills. A very community structure. From that community structure, a lot of stuff started. That's my specialty, Lower East Side, or Lower East Side, or whatever. But a lot of amazing things started. That's how New York City got recycling, for instance. Because in the community gardens, they started doing things. They said, oh, let's recycle. That's how New York City is going to get composting now, because these little gardens are like scientific experiments, and then the city picks up on it. That's how New York City got bicycling. Kind of strange, right? Bicycling. Everybody was bicycling in the Lower East Side for transportation 20 years ago, before the rest of the city, which was very dangerous. The people from the Lower East Side organized group bike rides to come into the rest of the city, mostly organized by squatters, because I also started this environmental organization called Time's Up, and we had a big deal to do with Get Biking. So we used the squats to organize that. We used the squats to organize the gardens. So the squats aren't just squats, they're also a place where people can organize. Let me see if they're coming. I'll do my part first, and then when they come, they can do their part. But my part's meant to go at the end. Question about squats?
Yeah.
Not really? A little bit? Like usually like 3 months, you have to be in there and try to get mail. And then usually it has to go to the courts instead of the police. Then after 3 months, is the next one is 10 years, and it's called adverse possession. And that means you get the building and stuff like that.
What happens after 3 months?
You technically, I'm trying to call one of those speakers. Technically, when the police come, you can tell them like, hey, you can't just kick me out. I'm getting mail here. Here's my mail. They have to revert to the court system. And the court system could be different. It's much better to go to court because you can kind of stall and stuff.
Wait a second, but do you live in this building and don't pay rent?
I live in a squat, yes. I pay maintenance. I believe I own the building.
So you pay like utilities, right?
Yeah, I pay utilities.
But not rent?
No.
Will you pay it to like a co-op, or you
Yes,
pay it to the
it's
legal
co-op,
owner? You don't pay to the legal owner.
No. So the squats that are kind of represented in the museum and the famous ones, so-called, are like ABC in Rio. How many people have heard of that one? Yeah, so that's a squat, believe it or not. It started off as a squat. In Europe and stuff, the squats sometimes called social centers. And it's a really good way to open up a building. You just don't open it up to live there. You find an abandoned building, no one's using it. You have a meeting with people in the community, and you all get together and like, what does this community need? They seem to need something for school, and we need to save this garden. And you start using the first floor of the building to organize something for the community. That's a social center. And then later on, you start taking over the rest of the floors and possibly live there. That doesn't so much happen in America.
No, but just clarification, I still think, no, me just my personal opinion, there's a difference in Europe between social center and squat, right? So social center is a form of legalized squat, while squatting is illegal when people don't pay utilities, don't pay rent, and they just occupy building and stay there like for free, they don't pay for nothing. And when they legalize somehow, like manage with like court, laws, like owners, it could become as a social center, as you said, right? So there's a difference in social center and squat, because squatting is like illegal, right? It's against law.
Well, social center starts up illegal sometimes.
Yeah.
There's also food places. All right, I'm going to reverse this part and do the second part first. And then hopefully those other guys will come. If not, I can ask questions. So, we got that question kind of a little out of the way. There's different reasons to squat, but basically when you go into an abandoned building, you have to break into it sometimes, and then you have to organize some people to do this. You have to kind of try to get your research, and it's a little bit better to break in one that's owned by the city. That's, an American thing. I'm not so good at how it goes. There are other cities like in Amsterdam where you could just pull up a boat and squat, or take over an old factory. In Berlin, sometimes the city will actually, you can go to them and talk to about it. So different places around the world, different situations. There's a situation where you can do something for the community and occupy the building illegally, or you can live there, which I do, right? I live in a squat. And then as time goes on, sometimes your building will get legal, or you'll have to move out, and sometimes you'll fight in the process. So Frank Zine, that we're kind of trying to talk about, so hopefully he's coming, but it covers about how to do this in New York City. And then so I usually come in on the second half and show you, once you get in the building, like what to look for. So I'm going to start that first. But when you get in these buildings, don't forget, most of the time there's no electricity, there's no heat, like the windows are even open. There's a lot of technical stuff just to get it feasible to live there. Now, years ago it was much worse. Now, sometimes you could get in a building, sometimes that like foreclosed illegally, and maybe they even have electricity. You can figure out how to turn it on. So you need your basic stuff, right? You need electricity, you need water, and you need to deal with your waste. Because years ago in the city, they didn't have waste. People didn't live too long, right? They had outhouses, and then they got plumbing. So there's all this technical stuff. So I'm going to start the second half first, so flip it around in your mind. Anybody still unclear what a squat is?
I'm sorry, can I ask a clarification question? So you live in this building, and basically you live legally, and no one can just kick you out, right?
Yes, any squat can be kicked out. Any community garden in the Lower East Side. How many people have been in a community garden? Right now there's a plaque on it. It says Green Thumb is helping out this garden. That's all junk, because Mayor Giuliani, if you guys remember, said clearly on the news over 40 times he would like to destroy every community garden. The people took over those places, it's the same thing, but now the city says they're okay with them. But that could change any day. The squats could, it's the climate of the city you're in. A lot of cities are getting together now and stopping squatting, just like they did with Occupy Wall Street.
But they do have problems with police, and how you solve problems, in your situation, just like this.
Each city is different how they deal with
it. But in your case, how do you solve?
You be tough, and you when the police come.
Yeah.
I mean, I could get into that. I don't know a lot about that. There was something in New York City called an eviction watch list.
No, but at this place.
Yeah, we have an eviction watch list,
yeah.
And we call people if there's a problem, and people show up, and that's how we saved all the squats in the gardens. And it was at a place called 50 Avenue B, which was Blackout Books. It was an anarchist bookstore that held this. Was before cell phones. There was also a pirate radio station in 7th Street Squat. Is it okay if I turn up the lights?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, cool.
So, and how many years does this place exist? How many
most of the squats that are in this area down here, I just need that one. Thank you. Oh, this one? Did you want to? Yeah, try to get that one. Oh, perfect. Doesn't have to be that dark. Is it okay with you?
It's better.
Better for you? Okay. Okay, this is the second half. First, I'm around one more time and see if one of the speakers are coming. They're not. Yeah, they're nowhere. All right, can I just get an idea, like, where people are? I know you're from New Jersey, you're from...
Both.
Where?
Eastern Europe.
Eastern Europe? Any place?
Eastern Europe.
Eastern Europe? Any place besides America? People from, where are you from? Berlin. Oh, man, there's an amazing place to squat.
Belgium, but I live here.
Belgium. And Berlin is like one of those amazing places where sometimes you do something, and then the city's okay with it. They don't fight you on it. That's not the case in New York City. What about those little gardens where you come out your front door and people are taking over the little gardens in front of them?
Squatting buildings is really difficult.
Yeah, that's what I hear. It's really changing. So I was really happy to see this setup here. Okay, that's my name, Bill Time's Up. I don't know why. Because I started this environmental group, Time's Up. So people call me that. This is the building I live in. Can't really see it, but I took pictures of this stuff at the museum. It kind of shows you right here how to open up a squat. If it has this X, that means the building is abandoned. And then people just broke into the building. And then the building I live in is called Umbrella House. It's on Avenue C between 2nd and 3rd. I didn't open it up, but I've lived there probably for over 15 years, okay? Not even sure. It doesn't look like this now. It's a lot nicer.
Are there a lot of other people in the same building?
Yeah, the guy who Steve Englander, he's the director of ABC in Rio. He lives above me, and I started this group. So a lot of activists live in this one. Bullet Space, kind of one of the more famous art squats in New York City. And they still have their first floor open. You can go there on the weekends, and it's like a gallery. The reason it's called Bullet Space because they were selling a lot of drugs in the area, and the heroin was called Bullet. Anybody heard of this building before, Bullet Space? Nope. Okay, ABC Rio, one of the most famous spots in New York City. No one lives in this building. It's a place where volunteers, there's very few places that volunteer run. They're pretty much all on this map here if you want to get one. And a lot of the squats, the gardens, these places are collectively decision-making, just like Occupy Wall Street, and also run by volunteers. So this place has a computer lab on the top floor. They have old school photography classes. They have a zine library. They have Food Not Bombs used to run out of there. They have a screen printing shop if people want to make t-shirts. They have you guys have been to the underage punk shows or whatever. Didn't someone say they go to punk shows? How many people have been in this building? No?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. What else am I missing? What else do they have there?
Dark rooms.
Dark rooms.
A little art stuff.
What else? The gallery, and then Time's Up kind of does bike repair in the basement. 297th Street, that picture. This is where that pirate radio station was, right here. I was a DJ on it, and then when we didn't have cell phones, we didn't have computers, how did you get information about it? Like when they were going to come destroy the squats or the gardens, we had our own radio station. It was called Steal This Radio. It's on 7th Street. Anybody know the artist Fly? Just kind of a, yeah, so Fly lives here. You know Fly? Okay. Want to say anything about Fly?
I don't know that much about it. My roommate loves.
Yeah. She makes a lot of zines and a lot of stuff like that. Also, these like zine culture were big with the squatters, a way to spread information backwards. Frank, who's supposed to be here, hopefully he'll walk in. This is where he lives. And this squat didn't actually get under the other thing that the other squats did with this UHAP deal. So the city didn't know what to do with the squatters. It's a longer story, but they transferred them to another group. Then the other group said, if you guys get legal, you can actually get your building. But he actually lives in a squat that's still a squat. This is a squat called C-squat, kind of like the more rugged squat where you can like knock on the front door. Someone will be there, hey man, I really just got off a train. Can I like sleep on the floor? And they might let you sleep there. So it's actually a real squat. Some of the other squats have kind of got past that now where they don't really let people travel and just stay there. It's a music squat, Leftover Crack. Oh God, there's like so many bands I could name. Anybody see any bands in C-Spot?
No.
Yeah, Leftover Crack lives there. You saw some bands there too, yesterday, right? Was it yesterday? 2 days ago. Yes, he came to the museum for the Left Forum, and I was like, oh, if you stick around, there's some bands. And there were like all these bands from England. It was just really low-key. How much did it cost? Like almost nothing.
Yeah, it was like suggested to me. Yeah, it was like $5.
Yeah, it's insane. We're like, how many bands for $5?
Yeah.
It's like 6, right, or something? Yeah, it was like, you know, it's that kind of thing. In front of this building, they get legal, they need to do some stuff, and they came to me, because I do a lot of stuff with gardens and a lot of stuff in the East Village. They're like, can you do something with the first floor? We don't want a Starbucks. It was about 2 years ago, and I was like, nah, it's too far for bike repair from the bridges too. But then I thought, wow, what a cool place to open up a museum. So opened up a museum there. It's about squatting, it's about gardens, it's about activism. It kind of tells a little bit of the truth and stuff, and there's like pictures and videos. We're also collecting people's pictures and videos, so we're archiving and trying to tell a different side of the story. It's been very difficult because, you know, as you said, squatters are not very scared of their history because they got such a bad reputation. The community gardeners were like that a year ago, but now they're all like, if you go to the Lower East Side, they all are so proud of their history now, and there's tours going on and that kind of thing. So hopefully that'll happen in the future about squats. These are just some of the buildings. Go ahead.
Since like most of these seem pretty older, like squats like established, have the people like tried to go through the adverse possession process, or like?
I think
because
so.
that takes 10 years, right? So
Yeah.
like, do you think like they now legally own these buildings, or they're still totally?
I think that all these things, it's never one thing or another thing. When you work on these things, it's always like pieces of things. The idea that people, like there's this guy in my building, I'm like, oh my God, the cops are outside. He tells me like, well, they'll have to kill me to get the building. And he was serious. And I was like, well, that's a pretty serious statement, you know? But the idea is like that energy of what he was saying, and the energy, the law energy, and all these little pieces really help. So it's never one thing. You know, but it's if the politicians don't like you, if they do like you, if you have the community pressure. So that law is a law in New York City. It says 10 years. And I think it helped because a lot of the squats in New York City went past 10 years, although it wasn't the only factor. But it did kind of give a lot of weight. But you know, I know this is crazy, but just doing a little bit of history, when this thing happened, when the city went bankrupt like 35 years ago, there were so many buildings, because even if you own a building, like if you own that building across the street and you stop paying your taxes, the city gets that building. About 8 of 10 buildings in the Lower East Side then reverted back to the city. That's why so the city was like giving them away for $1. So to say the squatters got a good deal is a joke, because a lot of people bought the buildings for $1. The squatters wanted a different way of life, where they would do stuff with the community, a different voting process. They had work days, so they built the buildings themselves. So it's not really about money sometimes, it's more about like community.
Well, my question was just like about the legal title. So like, were they, like after 10 years for most of these buildings, were they was the title transferred to the squatters?
It wasn't that, the law says that, but it doesn't just happen.
Okay. Yeah.
No.
So they were
They were
unsuccessful.
transferred to a group called UHAB, Urban something.
Urban
Urban homesteading.
Right. And then they said, the city said,
Assistance board.
the city said, you guys deal with these squatters, we can't deal with them anymore. And then we've been working with them to get up to code. That means we have to get real heat, we have to get real doors and all that kind of stuff. Once you get up to code, then maybe you'll get your building back.
Would you say that there's a general attitude of everyone who lives there? You know, I understand that everyone's pretty much like unique in certain ways, but to live together in a squat, you know, there's a certain mindset. You know, there's a culture there. You know, like, could you share a little bit about, you know, what the general attitude is, you know, about property, you know, and you know, why is it okay to live in a place like that? You know, if there's an exchange.
Well, I don't really like cursing, but I'll do it right now. I mean, fuck the system would be a good one for some people. Other people might be like, you know, I really need a place to live, and I don't get along, and I don't have much money.
Yeah.
And other people would be more leaning towards like, this is a place, if I want to be a serious activist, then I could live it. You know what I mean? So I didn't really move in the squat. I did for any of those reasons. I did because, I'll get your question in a second. What's your name?
Okay.
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 Okay. And you, where you live?
Me, I'm Village of Harlem, but I am working with Picture the Homeless.
Okay, cool.
And one of the things that has been discussed is the possibility of squatting, because they've already checked and seen that the city owns at least over 100-something buildings that nobody's in. And we can't understand why the city is willing to pay $3,500 a month per person in a shelter, when most people maybe need just about $200 extra for rent because they either lost their job or their rent went up. So there's a lot of problems there, but one of the things that we're looking at is why are these buildings sitting, and you're paying all this money to robber baron and homeless shelter owners.
So in your case, or it would be, the buildings are empty, there's a lot of poor people.
That's right.
So there's different reasons, and mostly, I would say that's the number one reason in certain neighborhoods. This area,
You didn't
though-
finish telling us why you moved.
Okay, but this area has a lot, like I love this area. So it's different for me. I mean, like the Lower East Side is like, I was born in New York City, and this is the, you know, when the cops come, people don't run away, and that's just amazing. They stand behind their actions. So I started this environmental organization, Time's Up. It's pretty big right now, and you know, there's hundreds of volunteers doing things. I don't even know what they're doing. So the idea was we wanted to save the gardens, you know, because we're an environmental group, and so the gardens were in this neighborhood, so we kicked in and we had to dress up like puppets, and we had to do a lot of demonstrating, making music, whatever. The squatters were very helpful to provide space when we were trying to save the gardens. We had to make props and puppets, and the building that I lived in, we held workshops to make these things almost every night of the week, because they were really looked like they were going to sell them all at the auctions. So they were saying that these abandoned spaces were not community gardens, they were just saying they were abandoned spaces, and Mayor Giuliani was going to auction them all off. So we had to really go into overdrive to do this. And I originally thought, going to all these demonstrations, like, oh my God, there's so many squatters, you know? But then I found out there's not that many, they just really care about stuff like that. So that's why I moved in, because that they meant something to me, and they also said that I can't use the first floor that much unless I actually start living in the building, because it became like a little bit of a security thing. So we're going to go on, but you can see from your question, there's a million different reasons why people would want to live in a squat.
Yeah.
But back then, it was not what it is today. I mean, it was crazy. For 3 years in a row, I had to sleep in a bathroom, you know, and I couldn't tell anybody that I lived in the building, because I was this director of this big environmental organization, and the people, the way they looked at it now, it's different. Also, I'm a plumber, and I just want you to understand, the situation has changed a lot. I ride my bike to a plumbing job, and at the same time, when I moved into the squat, had a totally different thing, but just to tell you the mindset of people. If I were to show up on my bicycle and someone were to see me and I put a price on the job, I would never get the job because they thought it was crazy. If you pull up on a bicycle now, most people will be like, oh wow, that's a pretty cool way to get around. He's probably a good plumber, environmentally conscious. So you got to understand, like, things change, mindsets change, and that's the whole thing with history is like, you know, back then it was perfectly normal to go up to the roof when the police came and pour your piss bucket on the police. Now, when people look back at that, like, you probably did that for some reason. It's like, no, the piss bucket was there, you know. So there's a politically correctness, you know, at each time there's different politically correctness, and you have to understand that. It's difficult, you know, that kind of thing. But so we're going to move on, because so how did people get into the buildings? This is a bolt cutter. It's pretty much the way all the community gardens were opened up and a lot of the spots were opened up. Also, there's a hammer where you could dash your way in. This really doesn't work that great anymore because they come out with this product called hardened steel. You probably see it in bike locks and stuff. So if you're going to cut it, go with a friend. You know, here's how you do it, right? You want to scope out the building you're interested in. You want to find out the history of the building you're interested in. You want to hopefully make sure it's owned by the city. You want to talk to the people in the community. And then when you have your right to go in, you kind of use something like this, and you kind of break into the building. So it's kind of a little bit illegal, right? Then this state-of-the-art tool just came out with that lithium battery, which is so amazing. So this is, everybody knows what this is, right?
No.
Nope, okay. This is a grinder, which operates at a very high rate of speed. And it's a cordless grinder, which means it has no power. This battery here powers the grinder. Now, the way that you used to use a grinder in the past is you'd have to have an extension cord and run it all the way to like a street pole. And the street poles are also a way that squatters got electricity, gardeners get electricity. In the bottom of a lot of street poles in New York City, they have these little, I was going to bring that kit, but I didn't bring it. And it has a little thing, it's called a pigtail, and you can plug into it. So as the light comes to the street, at the bottom of this light right here, you can't see it, but I can. There's a little opening, and you use like just a fork, and you turn in 2 prongs. There's most likely power. And that was how you got power to open up the building if you couldn't get in. But now this new one here is amazing. So what you want to do is get a metal blade, as thin as possible. Get your buddy. You always want to have a buddy, maybe a walkie-talkie, maybe a cell phone. And then this spins so fast that it'll cut through anything. But it makes sparks, so you want to have someone hold up like a rug or someone hold up a blanket to get in the building and stuff like that. Does that make sense to people? This grinder? Cool. How many people have used a grinder? No. 1, 2. And you see how it cuts through anything, right? It's crazy. So this tool is unbelievable. Okay, so you get in the building and you want to start thinking about different systems. How can I get this building functioning? You have a team of people, there's probably nothing going on. A lot of times in New York City and other cities, this is a waste system. And so the waste system goes by gravity. And the way it works is, you got the tub here. How many people know what this thing's called? The trap.
Oh yeah, the sewer trap.
Yeah, which stops the gas from coming up. There's a little water in there. So the water goes down, goes past the trap a little bit, backwards. But you see how it's going on an angle? That's called gravity, right? And it's all pitched. This pipe is pitched, it's in the street. It's all going down pitched. So it collects all the water from all the buildings and goes down pitched. You really need to get your sewage system working when you move into the building. Most of them do work. They just might be clogged or something like that. So what kind of pipe is this? This is actually clay pipe, because you can see these fittings. They used to put them in, they pour lead fittings. It was like a crazy thing. Now they use cast iron, or the newest is these no-hub wood clamps. Under no pressure. The water just flows. So if I were to take this upside down, water would just pour out, right? But if I put a hole in it, it's coming out already, it would pour out even faster. That's called venting. So air has to replace the water. So that's another thing we're going to talk about. Water going down, vents going up. This is the waste system. So this is what it looks like when you get into your building. You're going to see something like this. That's the toilet, that's the sink, old school tub with the cord, really heavy tub. So now we see how it works. You see that air going up, vent, vent, vent. As the water goes down, the air goes up. As each unit gets picked up, the pipes get bigger. 1.5 inch, 2 inch, 1.5 inch, 2 inch, 2 inch, 4 inch. Probably over here, 6 inch, 20 inch, 5 feet, whatever. So as more items get picked up on it, it expands. So the water goes into the sink, comes down. At the same time, a little bit of air goes up to the roof. If you get in there and it's clogged, you guys have all tried to unclog the toilet, right? So it's the same thing. You're going to have to try to get this working. All these systems are usually coming in from the basement. So you want to go to the street side of the basement. You want to test it maybe with a garden hose. And then if not, you get it clean out, and you can that means you can open up into the system and try to get it going. Any questions about this? All right, this is a more kind of an architect. Any architects here? Want to be architects? So this is more like an architectural drawing. It'll show how each thing is picked up, where it's going, what's going on with that. And then, it all comes together and goes into that spot at the street. Water. The water in New York City is amazing. Let me see if we can see some water towers. Yeah, there's some water towers. You guys can't see them. So, the water in New York City is amazing. It's like the lifeblood of the city. It's really great when you open up a building because you can just drink the water. It's good, it's clean, it doesn't really need to be filtered. This is the wall, probably in the basement, or on the first floor, mostly in the basement. And this is the street, let's say over here, plumbing supply from the street. The water will come in. What kind of pipe will it be in? It'll be maybe in lead if it's super old. They're getting rid of lead, it's crazy bad. That's the only thing wrong with the water. Or it'll be brass or copper. So the water will come in, and then it hits its first valve, the main valve it's called, right? So this valve, you turn it, and it opens it up, and you turn it, and it closes. Then this is a pressure relief valve, just because they don't want too much pressure. You don't have to worry about this. This is kind of a newer system. You just want to get the water on, so you don't need to know about this. But then there might be a water meter, and that's what it looks like. If the water meter, the newer water meters have a wire going to it, and people can read the water meter from the street. So there's technology that's coming into a lot of these things, making it very difficult to squat. Because if they know you're in the building right away, you don't have that head start. So some of the new electrical meters actually send a signal up, like your cell phone, and they're called smart meters. Those are going to be very dangerous. All the pot dealers are actually getting busted right now because they can see your electrical use and know what's going on. So along with these meters, that you need to study them. There's a lot of new technology. But most of the buildings you're going to be going into are super old. They're not going to have that technology. But if you do happen to see wires going to anything, you pull them out, like especially the meters, because that's an electronic way that someone can tell you in the building. So water's coming in. How do you go upstairs and you see there's no water, which is normal. The building's abandoned, there's going to be no water. So you want to turn the water on, get your buddy, get some flashlights, and you want to turn on this main valve. But you want to turn it on ever so slowly because it's a very dangerous, weird situation. You want to treat this with a lot of respect. And you don't want to just blast it on. It's not a good situation to do that. And then you want to have someone kind of at the first fitting, like wherever it is. And that'll be a sink. So the other day, I think it was like a week ago, I got a call and they were trying to get into a building. And they're like, we turned on the water in the basement and there was a leak coming through the ceiling on the second floor. How'd that happen? I was like, because you didn't check everything. So this water goes up 5 stories. So you have to check it everywhere, right, for a leak. If there's a leak, you can kind of cut it off and then adapt it, run a garden hose to it. So you want to get water. And the way to do that is you start in the basement. Yeah. So these are these cool water towers you see everywhere in New York City. What do you guys think? Why do we see these water towers? Anybody know?
To maintain
Water pressure.
Water pressure, yeah. How does the water get up to the wood?
Gravity.
Electrical pump.
Yes, most likely electrical pump. So a lot of the buildings that have water towers are kind of over 5 stories. And the ones that don't need water towers are under 5 stories. And that's kind of really important because as a squatter, you're probably not going to go into a building with electricity. So you probably want to pick one without a water tower. Would anybody want, this is the kind of crazy, and it's going to be probably the most interesting thing you learned today. Would anybody know why you want to go into a building or under 5 stories? Well, I said that.
Out of the city, I don't really know inside the city how the water tower situation is, but the water can only flow as high as the water level within the nearest tower. So that's how the pressure is regulated and stuff.
That is very close. Anybody want to pick up on that? The water can only flow to a certain point. Why?
It's
Without electricity, I guess, right? Would anybody else have a reason for that? It makes New York City unique. If there's a blackout, people would go crazy. They would be swimming across to New Jersey, but no one panics, right? Because they have water. Only the smaller buildings have water. Does anybody know why?
Because the electrical pumps will get shut off and send up the water.
That's right. Why, though? Why? What's the reason that these smaller buildings have water and the taller ones don't, besides electricity? We know it's electricity.
The gravity of how the water comes into the city from the
There's the
reservoirs
answer.
of the state.
Exactly. So the Catskill Mountains that the water comes from, it's an amazing design, are coming out at around 7, all the way up from the mountain. Whenever you take a tube and you fill it with water, water will right itself to the same height. So we're taking this water from the Catskill Mountains, the snow melts, it's amazingly clean water, and then putting it right into a pipe. All these small buildings are taking advantage of that, and that's why you have less pressure when you're up in the building. And that's amazing, and I talk about that a little bit on the tour. And that's a cool thing for squatters. It's a cool thing for community gardens. It's a cool thing for everybody, because you can go into these spaces and have water without electricity. So the electrical pumps pump the water up to these towers. Then the water comes out by gravity back down because it's nicer by gravity. If you have an electrical pump and you turn it on, it goes psh, you've probably seen that sometimes. It just shoots all over the place. But when water comes out by gravity, which is around 35 to around 65 in there, it comes out much smoother. So the people who live in the building, you'll see you get less pressure on each floor. But it's a great thing. So it means you can move into a building that doesn't have electricity because you can have water. And it's just something people don't think about, but it's a crazy, crazy situation. So the taller buildings, they need to have electricity because that's how you get water. So you don't really want to occupy a tall building because the water situation creates a lot of problems. Like there's a lot of metering and stuff like that. Any questions about this? Oh, these are amazing, these water towers, because they're built by this company. They have 13 rings, they're all built out of a certain kind of wood. And my dad would tell me stories how they used to swim in them and stuff when he was younger. And he said that they actually slept on the roofs because they didn't have air conditioning, and they would climb up the ladders. I was like, well, did you sleep on the roofs of the building you guys owned, and they were like, no, we went to the nicest buildings, and we all just went in and slept on the roof, and then we came up and swam in the water tower, and we got water from the water tower. So they were different types of squatters, and they just slept on the roofs, which is really common. I think before air conditioning, a lot of people would sleep on the roofs at night. Any more questions about water? Moving on. Okay, this is how the water comes in, not the greatest picture. So again, you're looking at the street wall right here, and it comes in on this pipe, kind of makes a turn right here. This first yellow valve, hard to see, it's called the ball valve, just on and off. This is a traditional turn valve. Then it goes into the water meter, and then it goes up into the building, spreads into different people's apartments. It only comes in cold water, it never comes in hot water. So the cold water will then revert. The cold water that comes in will go to a hot water heater, then it will become hot water, but the same pressure that's coming in will take over in the hot water system and it'll be treated the same. How do you get hot water if you're a squatter? Well, with a drag, how do you get hot water? Because you do need electricity. So, fire. What, fire? Yeah. So some of the early squats, Casa de Sol in the Bronx, they used to cook up their hot water. Bullet Space, they had a way to make hot water as well. I saw some early stuff where the shower heads would produce a little bit of hot water. We used to have those as well. But basically, you need to get a hot water heater and provide electricity, or you use gas. And that's how most people get hot water. But it's a little tough for squatters to get hot water. Most likely, you're not going to get that right away because you do need electricity. But there's other ways where you can use solar heating systems and drop the temperature a little. Or what a lot of people do is the water in the pipe becomes a little less cold and you take really quick showers and everything. But most of the time people got their water from hydrants. So this is a big plus to have water. What is this pipe here, this green looking pipe? That is the ground for the building. You've got to be careful if you see something like that. You always want to make sure there's a ground. The ground goes to the water line. That's a safe connection. Here's another ground here. So when you see these grounds, you don't want to mess with them because they help people not get electrocuted. But basically, these two valves here are like really, really important. They're the first valves coming into the building. If you mess those up, you're in a bad situation. You have to go out to the street, and you only have this much room to work. So if you screw this area up, it's best that you leave these valves on and then work with valves over here. So when you hear about all these nuclear power accidents, it's always the valve. Like the valve can fail, it's got water inside it, you can't really see what it's doing. So you think the valve's on, but it's off. So these valves are very delicate and you want to really give them a lot of respect. So I would think that this was the original valve and then they put another valve after it. That's a good thing, because you don't want to use the original valve. Just keep it open after a while. There are valves coming in with the New York City, and they haven't turned them off, the city, because they're terrified. So there's a lot of valves on the ground that people aren't messing with. They just keep them in the open position, because they can really present a problem. So any more questions about this? Okay, so if your water doesn't work, then you have to go to the street and you look for something like this. And it's in front of pretty much every building. There's a water shut off at the street. So in New York City, everything's underground. So let's just say this is my door. I'm coming out of my building. Here's the sidewalk. Pretty much right before the street, there'll be a little thing like this, and there'll be another one. You probably see in the little square things that says gas. This gas is water. There's no electricity, though, and I'll explain that in a minute. You have to go somewhere else. So you open up this. This is a little more technical now. Then you need a long wrench. This thing is like 5 feet long and has a T-handle. Oh my God, it's so washed out. I have to describe it. See, it looks fine over there. So it goes up here, it's got a T-handle and this little thing, and you put it down the hole, and then you just give it a half a turn, and that'll turn on water to your building. You guys see it on this one? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a little bit hard to get this tool. You know, you gotta like you gotta have friends in the right places. So here's both the systems working together. So we have our waste system, which is in the black, and we have our water system, which is kind of slightly above it. So we talked about the water being under pressure, right? Coming down from the mountains, going in there, getting in your hot water heater. This is your faucet. We've all turned that on almost every day. That water's under pressure. The minute that water gets past the bottom edge of your sink, it's just falling. So it goes from water under pressure to gravity. The gravity system is super easy to fix. You guys can do this with duct tape. Just make sure it's clear. You can do that. The water system is much more difficult. So if you have a leak in a pipe, it's really hard. I really would recommend you get someone else to help you. Anybody seen this thing where you solder the pipes together? So it's a copper pipe. You'd have to cut it open, fix the leak, cut open both sides, solder it, and then you have to use a torch. You heat it up, and then it melts around the pipe. If there's any water in there at all, it won't work. It will frustrate you the first time. So a good thing to do in the beginning, you really want to get your toilet working. So here's your toilet. The way a toilet works is the water will come in, there's a valve here, and it'll fill up. You guys heard it fills up after you flush it. It's like a little buoy in there, and then it shuts off. So you can actually get a bucket and use the toilet. That's called a bucket flush. So you just pour the bucket down here, like that, and it flushes everything down. And then it's just the same thing as this. Just this is actually doing a bucket flush. You turn the handle, this whole thing comes in here and goes down. So you can duplicate that just by a bucket. So you can use a garden hose, fill up your bucket, the bucket's near there. Everybody, all the spawners, they had piss buckets, they had water buckets. There's just buckets for everything, right? So you need water, and then you can do bucket flushing. But eventually you want to get your water working, and you can use like a garden hose. It's much cheaper, and you can try to tie into different systems. Like if there's a leak, you just go past that system, and then there's these new couplings, I think they're called snake bite couplings, that you get a snake bite to a garden hose end, and then you do that on both sides, and you just run garden hoses, because you don't really want to spend too much money. This is copper pipe, it's super expensive, so you just want to get the system working. If you get into the squat and you're able to stay there a couple of years, then you might want to think about upgrading the system. So cold and hot water, it comes in at the basement, like 1 inch, starts going up 3/4, and then it starts supplying everything in the bathroom at 1/2 inch. Now it's kind of opposite, right, of the waste. The waste starts off small and gets bigger. The water does the opposite thing because the water is using pressure and the size of the pipe. So the water will start off big and get small, and then kind of a little bit opposite. I mean, yeah, maybe the same actually, right? Because the waste will get bigger. It's just a little bit of the opposite direction. Any questions about this whole system? Has anybody ever did plumbing? Okay. You know it's a little hard, right?
Yeah.
It can be frustrating.
I have done kitchen flushes, but I haven't done that.
Yeah. So sweating the pipe can be a little pain.
I know, but also between the pipes and all type of stuff. Where it is like come from the outside, where it's like either have like either a water main or if they prepare a water main or it has sewer backup, they had to put a notice on it to make sure even in non-SWAT homes because they don't even know about.
Anybody else have any thoughts about the water system? It's really, really important to get water. You can't stress. You can't just go into a building and think you're not going to have water. Gas. Gas comes in again. You're going to go down to the basement with your flashlight, and you're going to look for a pipe that comes in like this. This gas valve is much different than the plumbing valves. You turn them. This is just either one way, straight with the pipe is on, crooked with the pipe is off. It's just a one thing like this. Comes in. You really don't want to mess with gas. If you go into a building and you smell gas, you want to go back outside the building and come in again, because you're only going to smell that gas when you come in. And you want to get really used to not being around gas, because once you're used to it, you'll get used. You want to get used to trying to not be around gas if you think it smells, because it's very dangerous, and it could be actually, after a while, you just don't smell the gas. The gas comes You know, I don't know, probably it's probably more engineer people how we get gas. Is that like gas comes from the top of oil or something?
It depends. I'm chemical engineering major, so I should know about this. But I'm more on the food side than the petroleum side. But I'm a freshman, so never mind. But anyway, gas comes either from like gas only wells, where they drill into usually flakier rocks like shale, where it's kind of like a flaky pastry where there's layers, and then there will be gas trapped in there. And like that's what fracking is. They just blow up the flakes to like let the gas get through easier.
But before fracking, how did we? Because we still have really
well,
big gas.
We still did it through shales without fracking. Just not like we would do it in like flakier ones where there was more like open space. And then also with oil, any kind of fossil fuel comes from porous rock, where the rock is kind of like a sponge, but not really because it's still rock. It's just there's microscopic open space in it, and that's usually filled with fossil fuels. And depending on how they do it, gas sometimes floats to the top of oil because they are related, but it depends on if it's like a propane or methane or butane. It depends on a lot of things. You can also get gas from landfills, but this is probably from, they take gas lines, they take oil lines, and then there's a secondary vent in the same well that keeps the oil thing from blowing up, and sometimes that's captured as natural gas.
And so gas doesn't really smell, right?
Yeah, it's completely odorless naturally. They have to add things to it for safety reasons.
That's what we're concerned about, right? Because like there's a gas leak, you can't smell it, it's bad. So the gas operates on a very low pressure. If there was a gas leak here, I could put my finger in and stop it. So it's not like water where it's like, once water starts leaking, it's impossible to stop. You have to get put out. Gas, you can stop. So how would you know that a gas leak is happening? The smell, right? And then how else can you think possibly you'd figure out a way? So
Light a match.
light a match, that's a more dangerous way.
That's more hassle.
Yeah.
You could, like I haven't actually heard of this being done, but I think in theory you could like submerge that section of pipe in water.
Exactly,
for
yeah.
bubbles.
Yeah, you don't have to do that. You can just go to any standard dishwashing detergent and you put it in a spray bottle with water, you shake it up, and if you think you smell gas, you'll spray it in here, you'll spray it in there, and you just look for it bubbling. And then that's how you find the leak. So the first thing you want to do is you want to open the window. Then you want to like get your soapy water with a lot of light and a lot of people, and you want to find your leak. Find your leak. And then you repair your leak. But also opening the window is key. And you can explain why, right? You want to tell people why you have to open your window?
Well, just in general, if there's a gas leak, you don't want the house to blow up. So.
Right, so gas can only be dangerous if it's contained. So there could be a crazy gas leak over here, but if the window's open, it's no problem, right? If the window's not open and someone hits the light switch, eventually...
They're gonna blow up.
Right.
And like that would happen a lot of things sometimes when you got when they try to call somebody before they start digging something, because of like back when they hear like over because of lack of infrastructure, when it was like dated back to 1887. 1887, because there were a lot of infrastructure like roads, bridges, and of course.
And a building just blew up in New York City.
Yeah.
I mean, God, where was that? It was
East
like,
Harlem.
Yeah, I mean, the whole building just blew up, and it was.
Two buildings.
And then I saw the report, and like FBI just happened to be riding by, and I thought that was strange, but it turned out to be the real thing. Like,
Right.
It really did blow up. So this is probably what happened. You know, that's why you got to be careful because it did come from some bad construction. You know, people have to be careful of these gas pipes. What is the gas pipe? We talked about the waste pipe was, just to go through the piping now, the waste pipe was clay, the old ones, cast iron, and now they're called this material called, it's kind of cast iron mix called NOHA. The water pipes were old school water pipes or lead, which is horrible, but mostly they're brass and copper. Gas pipes are just steel pretty much, hardened steel. And you got to make sure, there's a few different types of steel. If you want to repair this, you have to use the right materials. There's threads here, so they're screwed together, right? Old school system, you screw it together. The water system is sweated, so it just goes in. The cast iron are just like put together with clamps. So there's all different ways to put the pipe together as well. So you really don't want to mess with gas, right? I mean, you guys just moving into a building, you just want to make sure it's off. Like you don't, I mean, unless this is like a year down the road from when you open up a building. You do not want to try to get all the buildings lit up with gas. Because this goes into a branch system, which then goes to each apartment. And it's so much piping. Like one little leak, it's not worth it, because any kind of leak with gas, the city will go crazy and they will shut you down immediately. If you tell them, like, look, we're living in a building, the gas is off, they think differently about it, because a fire is your worst enemy as a squatter.
And that's your worst nightmare as well. So, because we've been in a conversation with, like, we were walking together, they said if they had to do something with it, they should call first, had their light festival before they do something wicked. You know what I mean? And that's the only type of problem that because we don't have a lack of training to do it and hire those jobless people in the neighborhood, and we gonna have a big problem in the long run.
So you don't want to have your gas on, not right away. So the people know we're looking at here, you see these all the times. These would be individual apartments. This might be your apartment, this might be the one next door, and the gas will come in from that main, and then it'll have shutoffs. See, there's a shutoff here, and you can see that shutoff there. There's a little hole in it, that's so you can lock it. So you're probably going to see it locked, and you'll have to cut that off. And you can use that grinder tool I was talking about to cut off the locks. Sometimes the pipes are locked. There's also a way that's called tapping, or in electrical terms, it might be slightly different. And you want to override the meters. So when you get in there, especially with electricity, you're going to go in before the meters. And you tap in and you get free electricity. So not only are we taking over the building for free, but we're taking over all the sources of energy for free. So that's a way to do it in the beginning. But, you know, in a lot of the buildings, people want to just get right to pay their electrical bill, and they can do that, and it gives them more standing in court. But then you're paying a bill. There used to be phone bills before cell phone bills, which don't exist, so there's no phone bill anymore. But most of the time, people did, when they moved into the building, tap into the electricity as well. Not anymore, I'm paying my electrical bill, which kind of sucks, but there was a time where I just had free power and electric, you know what I mean? So I had the choice of both powers, which I thought was really great. There are other buildings that I know they had what's called blackout, where they had special curtains that would block up the window because they were stealing electricity and they didn't want anybody to see them. So they had blackout, you know, closers and stuff. But not that people even know, like, who's paying and who's not paying. Sometimes the Con Edison doesn't really care about squatting as much as the city, you know, and sometimes if your squat isn't political, the city doesn't care either. So it's a lot about politics as well sometimes.
And bureaucrats.
Yeah, I mean, it's like a whole bunch of things. Okay, electricity, this is the thing you're probably not going to have in the beginning, but then later on you might have it. This is a little bit newer. I actually took this picture in C-Squat. So the electricity will come in again from this street. It goes into this box that you can't see. It's right below this box. And that would be the box to jump into. You can just go there with some people and you can just turn it on. Just on and off. Inside here are the fuses. If it doesn't go on, you turn it back off. You open up this panel and you'll see 3 different fuses. And then you try to figure out like how it works. And then this electrical here will go to the meters. And then the meters subdivide it to these other panels. Which goes into here. And you guys know what these things are, breaker fuses? So
If you box.
Yeah, so you can label it and try to figure out which apartment. Some apartments are going to be bad, some are going to be good. You turn them off. They could have the old school fuses, the round ones. This is more of a newer system. But you see there's a meter here. So eventually you want to jump the meters and go directly into this system. So you go around the meter thing. That way you don't really have to pay for it. So there's a lot of ways around to do that. You probably should get some electrical help with that. And that's pretty much it. This is the international squatter symbol. It's used all over the world. If you go by a building, you see it. Most likely it's a squat. And pretty much that's, you know, a lot of the squats in New York City, I noticed they have glass bottles. So if you see like glass bottles connected in the building somewhere, like just the end of the bottle, this end sticking out at you or something like colorful, that's most likely a squat too. So they use a lot of recycled stuff, and it's just a good telltale sign. That's pretty much it. I guess the other guys didn't stick around, but I'll stick around and answer any questions for like a couple of minutes. Sure.
Yeah, I'm sorry if I missed anything towards the beginning, but like if you just like overstay your lease, like what are the, like do you have rights as a squatter if you're doing that? Or like how long before you can definitely get evicted if you're doing that?
It's different in every city around the world, but New York City, we talked a little bit about the fact that if you have some paperwork that says you live in the building, like on an electrical bill, you can then talk to the police when they come and be like, no, I'm cool to be here. I have this bill. And once you show them that bill, you can go to the court system. And then the court system might give you some time. But most likely, you're going to have to move out. You know, it's kind of stacked against you right now.
But yeah, but I understand. But how did you manage to live so many years in this place? If it's so, like, if they just force you to kick it? Because I scored it myself, like in Chicago, some people would do this 5 days, and it was like public building, and police came and said like it's our property, so like it's property of the city, right? So no trespassing, and you know what I mean? They just kick you out like police and just like homeless, like kids.
I mean, different situations in every city, and I know people get the picture of the homeless, and they have a more strategy to put pressure on the city and say, like, we want a certain amount of buildings. So you can pressure the city by saying, like, we want those buildings. You can do more like what I'm talking about here, more like a direct action of you and some community members. So when you work with the city and then do it illegally, like tell them you're going to do it, there's more likely that the city will be okay with that. And certain areas of the city, for instance, so, in Pittsburgh or Detroit right now or something, I heard you can just, it doesn't even pay to squat, you can just buy the building. So, different places, and Occupy Wall Street has a division of where they're kind of opening up places in Brooklyn as well.
But I'm sorry, just
Yeah.
the last comment is just like, I'm just surprised that they can do it in Manhattan where like, rent is fucking expensive and all the rich people
Well,
can
these
live there.
buildings that I was talking about
Yeah.
today are 20 years ago.
Okay, but now it's not possible, right?
Now it is possible, but no one can talk about it. So
Yeah,
like,
right.
the people who live in the buildings don't want to tell you.
No.
I can't tell you where they are.
No. This was why I was surprised because of the presentation, because I talked to many people like in the arms community. Anyway, they say like, no, there's no squats in New York. So
Before you leave, do you know of any spots that are open right now? No.
No. I know a little about Detroit.
Detroit? And there's squat people squatting here.
Yeah, but also they're selling houses for pretty cheap right now. It's part of the policy of the city government. So people are buying houses for, I don't know, I think not as cheap as you might like, but maybe $20,000. Beautiful homes that need everything redone. And within, I think you have 3 months to get your ideas down on paper, but I don't know exactly what you have to show, the details of it, but you have to show that you have something underway within a relatively short period. I think it is 3 months. And then I think in a year you have to have that up to code. And if not, it reverts back to the city. But it sometimes takes people like another $100,000 to do it. Unless if you're a plumber, and you get a plumber, an electrician, and some other people together. And people are doing that kind of thing. I know people in Detroit doing similar kinds of things, but just on their own, taking over, real squatting, not buying it from the city. And actually more like 15 years ago. And, they took their time and they fixed up these.
Don't you think that the Occupy movement, even though maybe it's not as strong as it was, it really did a good job of letting people know, like, what's up with this? Do people get, these abandoned spaces and people need to live in them? And it kind of, a little bit, it's still illegal and it's still looked down upon, but it really changed the way the police were in America, were like so gung-ho about getting them out. Now they think about it a little bit more. I think Occupy really got it out there, don't you think?
Yeah.
It really, don't you think the rules changed a little bit after, certain cities.
I mean,
So,
I'm from here, but occupied just, yes, occupied public space, but still.
well, a lot of people, in other words, like, the police can only do, I mean, they can do whatever they want, but if the regular people who live around the city, like, hey, you know, there's abandoned places, people need places to live, they didn't really understand that before Occupy. Now everybody got that they were getting shafted by the banks, and all the information was out there, and there was more of an attitude, and more groups started to say, like, don't kick out this grandmother. There were people showing up at different people's houses, and still are. People can actually make calls today that people can't get kicked out of a place that, you know, so it's different, right?
Yeah, and it depends on which city and which neighborhood too, but, you know, Detroit had people who worked for various nonprofits who supported that kind of thing before Occupy. You know, were supporting keeping people in their homes even if they were being foreclosed, that kind of thing, and staying. And actually, I don't know if Detroit had that much of it, but I knew some people who at least supported it and tried to make links with other cities. In 2010 at the Social Forum in Detroit, there were people, I don't know from where, maybe some from Pittsburgh, I think.
Minneapolis had
Someplace.
Occupy Homes. That was a big deal.
Well, and they had some people, I don't know if Minneapolis was represented there, but other people, and they were talking about it, and there's a lot of interest. And, you know, so there were groups, one particular that I'm thinking of, and that supported people when they were trying to, like, and they still do, when they're having shut-offs of electricity. And, you know, Detroit winters are pretty bitter, especially this last one. And so it's the same idea, even if it's their house, but they might be renters and maybe up to you know, paid up or not, but, you know, stopping shut-offs, for instance, through winter so people don't.
So there's a lot of different variations. This is the most extreme variation that I'm showing you, that you just take over the building. But there's so many things we can work with the city, work with, just create pressure, and there's so many neighborhoods now. But Occupy Wall Street, one thing they really did, they just taught everybody in America, like, about the whole understanding about occupying space and not to, you know, all these abandoned spaces, we should take them back. So it's not, the word squatting was left out, but it was more like occupy, which is used as a substitution. You know, I should have used it more, but it's kind of used in a lot of different places just to occupy space.
So your point, how did these closes building like 20 years ago, it will not work anymore, right, in New York, right?
Well, I mean, Frank was going to maybe talk about how you can use the law and do this and still open up spaces, but the museum that I work with, we represent, like, examples. We say, like, here's an example of something that happened, and you're supposed to be inspired by that, and maybe you'll do it, maybe you won't. But here's the history, here's what happened, here's the struggle. So we're representing these 10 squats, and we're saying, with their permission, that, like, we'd like to talk about your history. Because I think for a lot of people, when you talk to them, and I'm sure you people probably thought the same thing maybe before you got here, it's like, oh, it's impossible. But the idea is, like, if you see an example and talk to people who've done it, and it really changes your attitude, like maybe you think it is possible. And if we had a thing about community gardening here, it was the same thing. And the community gardens are thriving right now in New York City. I mean, we started one last year at Time's Up, so.
Why was the mayor opposed to the community gardening? Like,
He wanted to use the space for other buildings and people could, like, they were just, he saw them as abandoned lots.
Oh, Bloomberg or Giuliani?
This was Giuliani.
Giuliani,
It was a long time ago, and he wanted to build things in the space.
Because they don't have enough buildings already.
So there's like this major thing that happened to go, like, all the
One plan was not how to do the squat, but one plan was to take public housing, a lot of which is built with, you know, grass around it, build buildings in the spaces between the public houses, and just build, you know, maximize the density. I don't know whether that will survive under de Blasio, I don't know.
No, but they tried to.
It's a little bit more than that, because they call it the infill project.
Right.
And I think Moses was the person who was behind how most of the public housing was designed, and they were really designed to be their own little cities,
Yeah.
which right now, from the way I view it, it causes problems now, because you don't have people interacting with the outer community the way that they should. But what was happening is because Bloomberg was much better than Giuliani in terms of looking at what people's real needs were. Everything was money, generating money, pushing people out of their communities. And these buildings, they were looking at like areas where people did soccer or parking lots or whatnot around these buildings, and they wanted to take all that away and put these buildings. Along with that, they were doing this process of, you know, certain apartments would look towards the project, but the main people who had these overly expensive apartments and whatnot wouldn't come in the same entrance. I mean, they had a whole crazy plan going on. And luckily, people went wild over it. They finally, public housing residents, who to me are really a sleeping giant, started to flex their muscles and went completely crazy over it, and were able to start some lawsuits and everything to push him back. And luckily, because of the timing of when they chose to do that and whatnot, it was just right around the election. And those of us in New York know what happened then. Certain folks who thought they were going to win didn't win. And it was just a whole change in the mindset of how to do these things. That is not to say that de Blasio is a total innocent when it comes to development and you know, paying back favors.
Right.
So it's going to be interesting to see how this all falls out over the next 3-4 years of these.
So are the gardens, I mean, are they under attack regularly, or are they mostly just letting them be?
Well, I think it was like maybe 12 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the big, I have to say this, like I said before, this woman is a little bit of everything always worked. There was this garden called Esperanza, I think it was on 7th Street, and the gardeners just gave it to the activists. They said, look, we don't want to lose this garden, do whatever you got to do. And we dug holes, and we put towers in, and lockdowns, and we had all these things in there. We made a huge campaign of it. This group called More Gardens, Time's Up, and a group called Rites of Spring, dressed up like water. So anyway, this one particular garden is an unknown story, but I was there, and we had to sleep there, and people coming from all over to encamp it.
What did you dig holes for? What was that?
We had to put in lockdowns, because when the city comes in to destroy the garden or to squat, they don't tell you when they're coming. So they usually come in the middle of the winter, and we have to run what's called a bike squad around. Now they don't, they used to do this thing called staging. This is the kind of thing my group does. We protect a lot of spaces, and we know how to do this with these bicycles. Now they do different techniques, but back then the police would get off work and they would meet like at 14th Street, and then they would stage to come attack us. So we'd find the staging, or they would come the day before and pull all the cars off the block. So there were key signs to look for. But they usually come when it was the worst. So we were protecting this garden to make a big deal about it. We knew we were probably going to lose it, but we wanted to, sometimes, just like this on this card here, this was the tank that they brought in to evict 13th Street. So when the city brought this tank in, it was all over the papers. And how could you evict poor people to put in other poor people? It didn't make any sense. So this image changed the squat thing. So with this particular garden, the same thing happened where the city overreacted so much to get us out that we ran to the courtroom, and for some reason, Elliot Spitzer, who was the Attorney General, had seen our struggle, and he came with us to the courtroom. I was like, wow, we have the Attorney General with us. And he had been writing something up. So we're in the courtroom, and we're trying to get what's called a TRO, a temporary restraining order. The judge is deciding, and I'm on the cell phone with the court, and Susan Howard, who works for the National Lawyers Guild, and she's like, you got to hold, we need more time. And I'm like, well, we have the tower. It's going to take them 2 hours to get some, you know, they had fire department with crane. You know, each one of these lockdowns was another 20 minutes, you know, and they're drilling, and they know we're in the courtroom, so they're trying to speed it up, scare people. And every time you lose a lockdown, you're losing, the city's going to come in. They have a bulldozer waiting to destroy it. Once they destroy it, it's not good. So we want to get what's called a temporary restraining order, and that temporarily stops. It doesn't mean we're going to save it. It just means we go back to court. So the judge said everybody should go to lunch, and I was on the phone with Susan Howard. I said, I don't know if we could hold out. And our one last tower holdout was someone who's brand new, and this was the one that would take them hours to get a crane, you know, and the judge would get back. And the I don't know. They went up on a crane and they talked to this young woman and they just kind of lied to her, like, okay, we're going to stay in the garden. And she came down. And so we lost a few of our lockdowns without a fight. But over 100 people were in that garden, record amount, all news cameras. It was really in the news. So when the judge came back, she was upset that the city didn't wait. And she granted a temporary restraining order over all the community gardens. And that became, the next day, Spitzer met with her, and that became the Spitzer Agreement. And then the Spitzer Agreement lasted this, I don't know why, but Giuliani never challenged it, which I thought he would, like to have, he had to have a reason why he was going to destroy. It protected over 400 gardens. That rode through Giuliani, and then it kept going on. And then, so that's the agreement that saved all the gardens. It was kind of, that's an unusual story. If you talk to people on the street, they'll just say, Bette Midler saved all the gardens. So, you know, a lot of it came from different directions and stuff. But that garden is not there anymore. It's called Donald Kaposha. He's a serial garden destroyer. He actually was the guy who got the property. He destroyed over 13 gardens. He's still trying to get another garden.
He is a owner? Or
he's a real estate developer, and New York City just made him like some president of the real estate commission, and he's a very big briber and garden destroyer in the Lower East Side. But the point is, it was a miracle. We saved most of the gardens, and somehow Elliot Spitzer was involved as the Attorney General, and then he became our governor.
Remember Adam Purple?
Yes, so Adam Purple started this garden called the Garden of Eden, and I think the crazy story on that is, I'm not sure how true it is, that NASA saw the thing from space because it had this like yin-yang symbol, and then talked about it, and then National Geographic like picked up on NASA's conversation about this green space that they didn't know, because it went from space, it had like this crazy round design, and from space it looked strange or something, and so then it got in National Geographic. You know, this community garden that this guy started. He's the most famous environmentalist in New York City. His name's Adam Purple. He wore purple. He had all these kind of weird things, but he would ride his bike up the wrong way to Central Park and connect the manure from the horses, mostly from the police, mix it, force people to do composting, get their crap, and then he made this garden out of people's crap, and it got bigger and bigger and bigger. It was like down on Forsyth Street. He is still alive today. There's an exhibit about him at the museum, if you want to go see it, and he is living at the Times of Brooklyn space. But if anybody wants him, I will give him to you.
But the garden was wiped out, right?
Yes, the garden was wiped out.
Yeah.
But it drew a lot of attention because a guy by the name of George Bliss, who happened to start the pedicabs in New York City, these things didn't happen by accident, he was a genius about getting the pedicabs. He developed this machine out of a beer barrel, turned it sideways and cut out footprints, and he made purple footprints. And he just was so upset that the city destroyed the garden, he led these purple footprints from everywhere for the city going to the garden. And then the garden became super famous, but by that point it was kind of destroyed. But it was...
And there's a high rise there now, or what?
Well, when these situations of gardens or squats usually get so much attention, the city tends to back off their plans and immediately say, well, we're going to put something good for the community there. So they put something, I think, good for the community. But it was only because they were in so much hot water.
In open space? You mean like a...
No, there's a building there. Yeah, I mean, I went to a meeting, and they were going to put a project there for deaf people. And it was crazy. They all had like balloons, and it was filled with these deaf people because they could feel the vibes of the balloons. And there was a community talking to them, we're going to give you this brand new building, and we got up and told them that they're just used because of their handicap to get into Adam Purple's building, you know. So the city's pretty clever sometimes on how it uses certain political situations to get them out of jams. But in most cases, as we know, the city will get the building and later on will change the rules.
Yes.
And this is a big case of a building called Char's El Bojillo, which is the community center on the Lower East Side. It's on 9th Street, I think it's on 9th Street and B, and this Greg Singer bought that building at an auction. It was the political kind of community center of the Lower East Side. It was amazing, and it's still sitting there with a fence around it, but what they were going to do is try to change the zoning, and we've been blocking it ever since. So sometimes you want to keep the fight going, but traditionally what they do is they get the building, and then they bribe, and they change the zoning and stuff.
Do you know how
So
many,
2 more questions, because we're going to go right to that. 5 more minutes, yeah.
do you know how many vacant spaces there are in New York City buildings?
No,
Picture the
but
homeless, if you call them, they get to.
they,
Yeah.
They've
But
already done the count.
there's a lot less depending on what neighborhood you're in, right?
Do you guys have a map of it?
They probably do. You can, like I said, just call them and ask.
Okay.
Picture.
Picture the homeless.
Do you know how many homeless people there are?
It's about 53,000. There's about 20,000 families.
In New York.
Yes.
And do they mostly live in shelters, or do they mostly live in shelters, or something?
Most of them are in shelter of some type, and many of them are still on the street.
But do you count also people from the street, or just people?
Well, I guess there's some extra ones in the street. But as far as the shelter system, it's about 53,000.
And what do you think people wouldn't want to go to shelter? I'm sorry.
Because shelters can be very unsafe, and they feel safer on the street.
What do you mean?
I mean, unsafe. Sometimes you can go to a shelter and have more problems than if you're on the street, unfortunately. That's how it is. That's why I was saying you're paying $3,500 a month to put somebody in a room with 17 other people, and they just have a bed and a little table next to them. And then there's several of these types of rooms in a building, and these people are getting off their robber barons. They're getting off like crazy. I mean, can you think about $30,000, $40,000 a month per room?
And sometimes you can do this technique that I give the example of here, and then go to the city, say we have all these families living here, and then it puts pressure on them because you hold the upper card, you're inside the building, and then you can convert the building to whatever. So,
Yeah, but it has to put pressure on the community board as well.
yeah, you got to put a pressure
If you
on
have a
them.
good community board,
Yeah.
and not all of them are. But the other thing is that now that a lot of landlords have figured out they can make more money by having homeless people with this scattered type housing and whatnot, they're doing everything they can to push the people in the buildings out, especially long-term tenants, which would mean more elderly in many cases.
Immigrants.
Into the street. And that's correct, and immigrants as well, and just put them out the
Immigrants,
street
including
and then
not
split up,
Latinos
carve up the
or
building,
Russians.
and then put the homeless in.
Yeah.
I mean, this is really.
And gentrification is pretty bad, as we know.
Mhm.
I don't even know, not this school, but
Change the whole nature of the neighborhood.
yeah, NYU in particular.
But they're the ones I identify, but they vandalize the 1, 2, 3 family home. Because I see a lot of them done happen in southern Brooklyn and Astoria.
So any more questions from anybody who didn't ask any questions? You didn't ask a question, did you? No. You good? How about you guys back in the way back? All right. Hey, you got another question?
Oh, yeah. Another issue that I have to deal with is a foreclosure problem. Because of a lot of those, any other neighborhood, there were like so many been foreclosures since 2003 over the last 10 years, like 1, 2, 3 family homes. Even the apartments that you talk about, the SWATs are being, for like a lot of families been facing foreclosure faced by the greedy banks and greedy lenders and greedy real estate owners that can be run by swatters. How the best part is how to put the end to foreclosures crisis in like throughout the 5 boroughs.
I mean, I don't really have an answer to that, but I could know what happened with the squatters is what the cities was very smart. They just said, oh yeah, you want your building? You know, just go get a bank loan. So it kind of made us not really squatters anymore. So sometimes the city will kind of give you an opportunity to do something, but it's actually smarter for them, but it kind of, the squad I live in now, we have a $500,000 bank loan, and we had no loan before. We would just do work days.
That's what you have, right?
Yeah. Well, you have got us, but it's through a bank. And I think we owe you have a hell of a lot of money as well. So the idea was like, the traditional way is like you find stuff on the street, everybody puts it in on a work day. If you get some extra money, you all do it. So the building is like constantly under construction. But with a different system, that's the system we're following now, is like you get out a bank loan and you fix the whole building up in like a year, you know, but then you pay the bank loan back. So it's like you're permanently in debt. And it kind of like makes you act differently. I don't know how to put it in better words, but when you're not in debt and you act a lot more politically conscious, and I don't know how that is. But with Time's Up, we do this bike repair classes 5 nights a week and workshops, and I know that people have come to me after they learn how to use tools, they act totally differently because you can become more independent and You don't have to worry about working for a corporation when you learn how to have skills and stuff like that. So it's actually the same kind of ideology. When you're in debt, you will act totally different and be more likely to be subservient to the government or something like that. So it's not just the squatting, it's the idea of not going into debt and fixing it up yourself, and the ideology of the group meetings and the process. And the community gardens use the same process. There's no community garden that I can see that's in debt, by the way. They figured out a way that they just would never go into debt, which is amazing. But the squatters are now going into debt, because of the programs are making them kind of go into debt. There's all this overhead of insurance and this and that and the other thing.
Why couldn't you just continue without it?
Sometimes the neighborhood around you changes so much that the situation becomes like, wow, we can't really have a squat in the middle of there's NYU students moving in with hampers. It's
like yuppies.
Yeah, it's just
yuppies and Russian and high-class Russian immigrants.
You have to do the best you can do. But certain areas you can still do that. And by this time, you had dumped hundreds of thousands of dollars into your building. You're like, do we really want to lose it? Because and it would be so much nicer to have heat. Because I've lived without heat.
The thing is, you're afraid that if you don't fix the building up, they're going to come after you as squatters and kick you out? Or?
I think that the squatters, and I wasn't there, I was kind of working a little bit around it. They accepted this deal from UHEB, and the deal had rules. And it was seen as not the greatest deal, but it was seen as an okay deal all around. And it was a very famous deal, and these are just these famous squats I'm talking about. And the deal was, if you get your buildings up to code, then you can have your building, and no more of this fighting and stuff like that.
And bickering.
Right, but that deal involved a lot of money, and I don't think people realized that there was, with the loaning of money, it also changed the attitude. Because right now, I would say that in these political squats, the way they're voting people into the building is how much money you make, do you have family, not how much you're doing for the community. Which I think that used to be was when they voted people in, it was oh, what gardens you're involved in, what you're doing. Now it's changed. I don't know why, just because the whole principle.
So some of these squats have like empty apartments and you can apply to get in?
Yeah, now the squat that I live in, you can go to have a meeting and try to get on a waiting list. But, you know, going back 10 years, no one wanted to live in these things. Right. It was insane. Now everybody wants to live in a squat.
Yeah, but also like low-rise buildings, like 1-2 family homes, like even if they want to continue to live here, they also have a call NIMBY. Instead for oh, not my backyard, this and that. Again, big box retail or big condos that want to harm like so in Brooklyn, instead of like doing it better, they do anything worse.
Right, and
but it doesn't happen in Brighton Beach.
And my expertise are in downtown, and this is ridiculous, but Frank, who is going to be here, and picture the homeless people over here, their expertise are in different areas, so they can tell you all about different areas. But like the area that I'm talking about, like our stuff is kind of done. You know what I mean? Although there is an amazing amount of low-income places and different programs. Also, you know, all of Avenue D is projects, and so there's a cool thing about New York City, even though it looks bad, in certain areas of the city, dotted everywhere, are like medium income, low income, and I feel that this will help New York City survive. It's not going to be possibly what people think, although it does look like it when you look out the window.
It's also like 3 blocks away from here. Like it's still mixed out here as well.
And we know that mixture is really cool. We know that mixture is like it really helps the neighborhood. And there's also other things that happen where when you look at the trends of people, they do like to go to these areas that are more real for drinking at night, and bars and stuff. And so there is this weird situation where people do like want to be part of the realness, the real people, the gardens, the squats, the poor people. You know, they try to get very close to it. I think they psychologically don't realize it. They want to be connected to that, but they don't know how to respect it, I guess.
Well, that's why they came to New York. But then they just, I don't know what happened. It was like, these people came to New York, and the city started changing behind the money
Right.
that many of them were bringing even from overseas. Even though they wanted the nuance of New York, they were killing it at the same time.
Yeah, there's a certain truth to that. I'm a real New Yorker. I've been here my whole life. I was born here. My whole family's born here. And there's a certain like crazy truth that the things that people want out of this city, they're actually destroying when they come here. And it's really strange, but that's just how it is. I'm an environmentalist. You know, you can talk to everybody everywhere. They'll say, oh yeah, I'm an environmentalist. But like, you know, that's not, I mean, I'm drinking bottled water, so I shouldn't talk. But
I want to ask you one more question about when people apply to get into your buildings, do they have to buy in? Do they have to pay a?
Yes. Well, Frank's building, who's not sitting here, hi Frank, his building is still a real squat. So my building just became legal. So with the help of UHAB and other activists and stuff. So now there's a waiting list and stuff like that. I'm not very happy with the process. You know, there's a lot of different opinions. I just say because I'm an activist. I want only activists in the building. But then there's other people who said like it should be just poor people and stuff. So, not you, but one last question from someone else. No one else has never asked a question. This is the last question. How about you?
Would you do an interview for Paper Tiger TV?
What?
Would you come to Paper Tiger TV over in the War Resisters building on Lafayette and do an interview on this?
Yes.
Sweet.
So,
but, real question. You say, what do you think we could do to help preserve New York City culture? I mean, I'm a red New Yorker, as were my parents. One New Yorker to another. What do we do about it?
well, the building you're in is amazing. It's owned by the J.N. Musty Institute
Yeah.
or something. Yeah, so there's all these different nonprofits in the building, and you know, I tried to get in there years ago, but it's a really cool building on Lafayette Street, and
yeah, it's Lafayette and Bleecker.
Yeah.
And,
But aren't they selling it?
There's a lot of talk
Structural
about whether or not we're going to fix it up. I mean,
I thought that had been
there's,
decided.
it's a contentious thing at the moment, so I can't really comment. And you know, even though I attend all the meetings, it's like, okay, no one's really clear about whether or not we're going to sell or repair. We seem to be aiming towards repair because nobody wants to part with the location. You know, it's such a great place. So, but for the most part, you know, it's like we house all these, you know, amazing organizations like War Resisters, Deep Dish TV, the New York City Housing Community. It's like, you know, you can just look for the whole.
I know,
list.
I've never been there, yeah.
All right, I do have an answer to your question. How can we preserve this little part we go in? And this is like so simple answer. It's unbelievable, but no one does it. Support. And right now, like I just made this spaces, radical spaces map, and right away it's no good anymore. So there was this hippie cafe, like that's been there forever, and just recently, everything they've been preaching about medical marijuana is becoming true. Like people are moving to Colorado because this one part of marijuana is curing their kids from having like spasms. You guys hear about this?
Yeah, it's epilepsy.
Yeah.
Epilepsy. And this place that was preaching this forever lost its lease. So it's a little scary, like they were right the whole time, and yet they're gone. And there's another place, the LeftForum was right the whole time, and they're gone. And probably Blue Stockings is going to disappear soon too.
Really?
So, yeah, I mean, you've got to support these activist spaces if you want more of them. You can't not support them. And I think a lot of people don't realize you give a little bit of money to Greenpeace, it goes a long way. I run a lot of stuff, and we get like zero support. So the support in New York City is weak. And if you want more stuff, you got to support it.
Thank you. Blue Stockings.